needs. Commissioner Thompson, could you do the notice of
Yes,
meeting
let us
statement?
pray.
Oh, we can do the notice of the meeting.
Do what?
I
Notice.
said, could you do the notice of meeting?
Can we not
statement?
pray first?
No.
Where is it?
I'm gonna tell you when you're supposed to do it.
Thanks, I've been on this thing.
Have the notice, Sandra?
I got it right
Okay.
now. Should have it memorized. A news release announcing the date, time, and place of the February 20, 2019 commission meeting was distributed February 19, 2019 to appropriate media and other groups or individuals who have requested notification. The announcement and agenda were posted at the Department of Disabilities and Special Needs Central Administrative Office and on the website. The public has been notified that accommodations such as interpreters, mobility assistance, or other assistance will be provided to individuals with disabilities and special needs if requested in advance.
Can I have adoption of the agenda?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Now, Vicki, would you please do the invocation?
Easy over here. Let us pray. Father, we thank you for this opportunity to serve. Please allow us to be your vessels and to make decisions according to your perfect will. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. May I do the introduction of guests, starting with Rufus?
Rufus Britt, DDSN.
Robert Bernie, DDSN.
Anna Vanderbilt, DDSN.
Pat Bailey, DDSN.
Susan Beck, DDSN.
All right.
Lisa Weeks, DDSN. Ann Dalton, DDSN.
How'd y'all get the front row?
I reserve.
We put reserves on it.
Oh, y'all put Richard. Okay, I'm just curiosity killed the cat. Go ahead, thanks.
Good morning, Chuck Norman, DDSN.
Bob Jones, Newberry Disabilities Board.
Joan Cooper, DDSN. Rebecca Godlove, Arkham Next.
Sylvia Richardson, Backup Center.
Kelvin Felder, DDSN.
Linda Lee, my daughter's at Witten Center. I'm president of the Parents Club.
Dorothy Goodwin, Community Options. Margie Williamson, Arkansas, South Carolina. Kelly Katz, Advocoach. Deborah and Heather Wilson, Richland County.
Heather Waddell, Tri-Development Center.
Mark Russell, Baptist Center.
George Osborne, Horry County.
Susan John, Horry County.
Hello, Tim is Mary Jo Boyd.
Victoria Hardway, Maryville, DSN.
Betty Lee, Clarendon County DSN Board.
Robin Hickman, Sumter DSN.
Jerry Mize, Oconee, DSN.
Kathleen Lent, Aging Plan. Bert Schmidt, Center for Developmental Services.
Kelly Hills, Oregon Injury Association, South Carolina. Sarah Brownson, Spinal Cord Injury Association.
Thornwell Simmons, Protection and Advocacy.
Ike Moss, Calhoun County Disabilities and Special Needs.
Thank you and welcome. Glad to see some new faces. Can I have approval of the minutes of the January 17th, 2019 commission meeting?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Public input. Is Susan Jones?
Thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'm speaking on behalf of the South Carolina Human Service Providers and the Horry County DSN Board. There are many providers across the state that have significant concerns about the department's decision to move forward with the market-based rate for case management. There have been multiple meetings whereby providers have been told by state leadership that we need to just change our business plan and that the current market-based rate is doable. I think it's very relevant to call to your attention that monthly information is distributed to providers regarding the billing activity across the provider network. There are roughly 46 providers who have received monthly statistical information on their billing performance and the impact that it will have when the rate goes to a 25/20 rate for a face-to-face visit, as well as a 15/50 rate for a non-face-to-face visit. This billing performance rate has been tracked since May of last year. During the entire 10 months of data collection, there has not been one single provider who has sustained billing at 100% of their current reimbursement rate. If you review the data, there are months when providers do better, and then there are months when providers are not able to sustain that for multiple months in a row. As recent as last week, providers were given data, including how this changed the market rate could expect to affect them from a monetary standpoint. I will share with you that Horry County DSN has been in the top 8 best billing providers every single month since we began to track this information. To date, we stand to lose $95,000 every 6 months if this rate goes into effect. Every other provider that is billing above us will also lose money, as the rate is not sustainable and many below us will be devastated by this. So let me just ask you this. How can a provider change their business model knowing that from the start we're hamstrung with the rules, the regulations, and the market rate that's being proposed? 1, the rate is questionably inadequate. 2, we are told that if we travel to visit multiple people in a day program, we can only bill the first person at the $25.20 face-to-face rate, and all the others are going to be at the $15.50 rate. How do you leverage seeing multiple people with this requirement? Then we're told that there are soft caps of 40 units per quarter. Basically, you're capping that at an amount of service that you can perform. All of these things combined, as well as the activities that we are required to do while performing our job, examples such as travel time, inputting service notes, copying, faxing, authorizing, attempting to contact people that go unanswered, those are all non-billable activities that we get absolutely no compensation and reimbursement for. As a commission, by legislative mandate, you are tasked with overseeing the department's services, advocating for services on behalf of families, promulgating policies and procedures that affect persons with IDRD, autism, head and spinal cord injuries. How is it then that the commission can conceivably agree and believe that this decision is in the best interest of the people that we're serving? Executive leadership keeps saying that the boards are the safety net for consumers and their families, as indicated by state statute. State statute reads, county disabilities boards means that local public body administering, planning, coordinating, and providing services within a county or combination of counties for people with intellectual disabilities, related disabilities, head injuries, and spinal cord injuries, as recognized by the department. It does not say that a DSN board has to offer and perform case management. This is critical for the commission to, I think, to understand this, as who will be the safety net when the board providers can't afford to perform case management within their own county. This isn't a perfect storm that's waiting to happen. We're looking at a tsunami that is going to happen. Providers within the network are already jumping ship and divesting themselves of case management because they, like all of us, cannot afford to take a $95,000 loss every 6 months, or even more than that in many cases. What's going to happen to all the families when consumers no longer have a case manager? There are simply not enough providers in our system who are willing to expand case management, knowing that they're already losing money. Why would I, as a provider, elect to go to the neighboring county to offer case management when the travel distance is further and there is no reimbursement for travel and the travel time is not reimbursable anyway, or the rate being an issue? I think it's important to be prepared, commissioners, because you're going to begin to get multiple phone calls and complaints from families when they cannot find a case management agency or provider willing to support their family member. What will happen when the new plan of service needs to be completed and waiver services need to be authorized and there is no one in place to complete these duties? Then who loses? Of course, it will be the family and the individuals, as well as the provider, who might consider picking up the case, but they cannot bill for any services because the plan is expired. DDSN can't recoup the services either when a plan is not current. How does the state leverage Medicaid when the basic things are just not in place? Commissioners, the rates that will be given to providers beginning July 1st is a tsunami in its greatest proportions, and providers are being told to change their business plan. I think it's very sad as a state agency and as providers that we're willing to put the people in jeopardy that we are tasked with supporting. I encourage you all to really reconsider this and to look into this much more significantly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Deborah McPherson.
Morning. I spoke to you last month about my concerns regarding ongoing abuse and deaths. I encouraged you to go back and review the state OIG audit of Mentor, and I further encouraged you to carefully restudy the accountability plan for Mentor and other high management providers presented in December. Following the January commission meeting, 2 employees working at a Mentor facility in Richland County were arrested on January 25th for neglect, exploitation of a vulnerable adult, and intimidation. A consumer was pushed to the ground and hit in the head by one of the staff members, and the other staff member then intimidated and told the consumer to tell everyone he was lying about what happened to him. On January 31st, a staff member at Midland Center was arrested for picking up a resident around his waist and slamming him onto the floor. I support Commissioner Thompson's position that the Commission needs to focus on risk management changes and taking progressive action with providers. Given that there have been 2 LAC audits, 2 federal OIG audits, studies conducted by Curran Company, a study conducted by PCG, 2 state OIG audits, a state and House legislative oversight review, and a study currently being conducted on the provider payment system by the Mercer Group, I do not support the agency having yet another study done to examine the entire agency. The A&E and critical incident data support the need to focus on risk management. I would recommend the Commission hire an outside consultant to focus on risk management if funds are appropriated by the General Assembly. However, the Commission can't afford to wait to take action until July. I support the Commission's efforts to develop and approve a policy regarding the use of cameras in the regional centers. While the use of cameras may sometimes feel like an intrusion, the first thought most of us have when a tragedy occurs without witnesses is hopefully there was a security camera that caught it. I attended the recent Commission Policy Committee meeting, and some public members at the meeting felt the cameras would not prevent abuse, and they questioned why staff that would abuse individuals had been hired in the first place. The LAC audit recommended that if the General Assembly failed to amend Title 44 to authorize electronic monitoring of common areas of all facilities which provide services to DDSN consumers, then DDSN should require all board providers to install such monitoring equipment. This LAC recommendation was made before the CMS published its final rule in January 2014 requiring home and community-based services to be provided in settings that meet certain criteria. The final rule applies to all residential settings where people live or receive home and community-based services. It does not apply to nursing facilities, hospitals, institutions for mental disease, and intermediate care facilities for individuals with intellectual disabilities. CMS issued a policy regarding the use of video cameras in common areas of ICFIDs in 2011. The policy indicates the use of cameras must be in ICFIDs must be reviewed, approved, and monitored by a specially constituted committee of the facility. And if approved by the committee, written informed consent must be obtained for every affected client or designated guardian prior to the implementation of the camera. Video cameras may be used in common areas. CMS prohibits the use of cameras in areas where there is highest expectation of privacy, such as bathrooms, areas for private visitation, or areas for private phone calls. Note that the policy does not necessarily prohibit the use of cameras in bedrooms if written informed consent is obtained. Video cameras may not be used as a substitute to supplement to adequate staffing or supervision protocols, and the cost of the video cameras must be incurred by the facility, not the clients. I looked at the research regarding the use of cameras in nursing facilities because these facilities, like ICFIDs, are not covered by the CMS final rule. Concerns about elder abuse and neglect have led to a growing interest in allowing installation of cameras and other recording devices in resident rooms. Currently, several states allowing recording devices to be placed in nursing home rooms such as Illinois, Maryland, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Texas, Washington, and California. New Jersey has a camera loaner program for families if they suspect abuse. Utah in 2003 passed legislation allowing use in assisted living facilities. There was an attempt in South Carolina 3 years ago by Senator Paul Thurmond to pass legislation to authorize electronic monitoring of a resident's room in a long-term care facility. The vote in the Senate Medical Affairs Committee was evenly split. After nearly 2 days of policymaking on electronic monitoring, virtually no research exists on the use of resident room cameras to detect or deter abuse in long-term care facilities. Brown University conducted an online survey in May 2016 to learn about nursing center and assisted living policies and current use of cameras in residents' rooms. 39 of the 228 facilities responding to the survey reported cameras being used in resident rooms. Of the facilities responding, there was higher use of cameras in assisted living facilities than nursing homes or combination facilities. Those responding expressed the following concerns. Cameras violate the privacy of residents and staff alike. Cameras could impact trust in the relationship between residents and staff. Cameras could put undue pressure on staff and lead to them seeking employment elsewhere. Camera footage could be selectively edited and interactions between residents and staff could be taken out of context. There were benefits expressed by those responding. Cameras can help with the investigation of allegations of abuse and neglect, providing stronger evidence that either it occurred or did not occur. Cameras can ultimately deter misconduct such as abuse, neglect, and theft of residents' personal belongings, and the footage can be used to keep staff vigilant and aid in training of staff. And cameras may give peace of mind to families who are concerned about their loved ones. Cameras are not a substitute for good care, family involvement, or monitoring, but cameras can certainly help in the investigation of allegations of abuse and neglect, especially individuals involved if they're nonverbal. I called Kenny Howard at the Atlanta Regional CMS office in 2016 when statements were being made by the DDSN state director that installation of cameras would jeopardize Medicaid funding. Ms. Howard indicated that there was no CMS policy regarding cameras in home and community-based settings, only ICFIDs. Cameras, however, would be allowed in community-based residential settings on an individual basis if the need were identified in the individual's person-centered plan and written informed consent was attained. The final rule does require individuals in community-based settings to have privacy in their unit, including lockable doors, choice of roommates, and freedom to furnish and decorate the unit. Individuals are to control their own schedule, including access to food at any time, be able to have visitors at any time, and have a setting that is physically accessible. To reduce abuse and neglect, I would encourage the introduction and passage of legislation for an adult abuse registry. House Bill 4413 was introduced during the 2017-18 legislative session by Representative Gary Smith, and I believe it could serve as a good starting point. And I would also support your efforts to increase the hourly rate of pay of direct care workers. And just one of the things that amazes me, I'm retired. I get on the computer. I look at some of these arrests. I start looking at judicial websites. I start looking at arrest sites. And you would not believe some of the information I find about some of these individuals that have been arrested. Some of them, their records of prior assaults were removed. And a lot of this I was not aware of, but many of them agree to go to pretrial intervention and therefore their records are not on there. So we wonder, the question was asked, how these people were hired in the first place? Well, some of it's because of that. And then we look at, I saw one of the individuals that was arrested at Midland Center, and I found where his father was arrested about the same time, had, stolen pistol, guns, illegal drugs, and I'm like, and they're living in the same household. And then we wonder why this kind of stuff happens. We've got to take some action. This is too important for people to serve. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, commissioners update. Have any commissioners update? Nope. The policy committee report.
Okay.
Ms. Thompson?
Sam, help me out if I. Okay, so under tab 3, we discussed several things in the policy committee meeting the other day. So in the first one, you'll find the governance policy with the crossed out references that mostly had to do with the choosing one form of governance called the Carver form of governance, which allowed us to have the 5 policies that we had when I started back almost 4 years ago now. And it also includes a checklist of things that the Senate Judiciary Committee or the Senate Oversight Committee and Philip Willis suggested that we put in order. And I have sent out, Susan sent, or somebody did, sent out the cleaned up version behind that. And the committee recommends that the commission adopt this revised governance process policy.
Okay.
I have, I appreciate you sending out ahead. I'm sorry to take this. What would be the referring to? The fifth full paragraph, if you take the one sentence of the paragraph, regarding the Robert's Rules of Order, and particularly the chairman temporarily removing themselves from the debate. The training that we had on Robert's Rules of Order roughly 2 years ago, maybe 3.
Said that you could in smaller.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's basically specifically said that Roberts doesn't contemplate the chairperson removing themselves in small committees.
Well, that was.
Because of the nature of it.
Yeah.
And so I don't agree with that. I'll just say
I
that.
understand that. That was Philip Willis's comment when he wrote the report up, that at that time our chairman was debating heatedly on issues and talking over and then voting. So we could take the part out about debating. I don't know if we should take the part out about voting.
No, I think it doesn't. I mean, here's the issue that I've got. I mean, particularly particularly where we've got a small group like this.
Yeah.
And let's assume that our maximum is we're at full 7. I don't want to remove more than 10% of our voice from things. And I agree with you, the chairman should conduct themselves in an appropriate fashion. But, and I'm not.
This isn't about
this.
you.
Yeah, I mean, but
I'm so mean.
But I hate to think that simply by the fact that somebody has essentially agreed to be the chairman, that they're removing themselves from the debate. I mean, the idea behind that is if you have an enormous, you've got a committee of 35 or 40 or 50 people, yes, then you don't have to have the chairman's voice because of the size of it. But when you've got a group of 7 people, I just don't agree with that.
Or 4.
Or 4. I mean, or 4.
I mean, if we keep shrinking, then you'll be debating yourself.
Yeah, I mean, obviously any position of power can be abused, and that's where votes come in.
Right.
To address that and contact. But having that as a policy element, if the chair wants to act in that fashion, they certainly can.
Yeah.
But I disagree with having it as a specific requirement.
Is there some way, I wonder, that we could satisfy that requirement and allow Mary to go back and say we've checked that box? Can we say, well?
I mean, I think we can say that it will be facilitated by following Robert's Rules of Order.
Yeah.
I just think we can remove the next sentence.
The thing.
And not violate that.
Okay.
Because the next sentence actually violates Robert's Rules of Order.
Well,
it says the chairperson must temporarily remove himself or herself from the position of chair in order to participate in the debate.
not in large bodies it doesn't, but in this one.
Right, that's what I'm saying, in this situation.
This one, it doesn't necessarily have to apply, but it could.
Right, and again, there's certain things that, again, within the training that we had, that there's not one Robert's Rules of Orders. There is a compendium of rules that are used to facilitate that are flexible based upon the size of the group. And you have a completely different set of rules when you have a large raucous group as opposed to a smaller committee size.
Well, we're saying debate will be facilitated by following Robert's Rules of Order. And you want that to be the only sentence in the paragraph?
Yes.
Sam?
So
I
basically,
would.
we just need to strike out the
Sam,
rest.
Sam was on the committee, so I want to hear what
Sam,
you
what do you think?
Well, I can agree with what Gary's saying. After all, we have 7 commissioners, and each of us, well, we're supposed to have 7. And each one of us represents a congressional district, and in essence, you're taking the representation of the district away of whoever the chairman represents.
That's true.
If you remove them from any debate. And so I was concerned about that, but I also remembered the
report from the Senate,
right? And but the discussion about this being a smaller group and more collegial sort of rules applying, I think we can behave ourselves and live with that.
I think so, yeah.
I'll try.
And I think that's how it could be presented to the Senate.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you
I
asked to
do.
do that.
I mean, I think that's 100% pursuant to the training that we received from the parliamentarian who emphasized that. I mean, that was a specific question that was raised about the role of the chairperson on a committee of this size. And within Robert's Rules of Orders, that's what's contemplated. So I think we can just, I don't like having that sentence.
Just remove that sentence.
That would, I would not vote for the policy as it is presented because of that sentence.
Okay, I can live with it coming out.
Well, can I have since it comes from committee, but since it has been amended, I think y'all will need to make a motion for that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd make a motion then that the sentence involving the chairperson remove themselves from debate be eliminated.
And otherwise,
And
pass it
otherwise,
as presented.
And otherwise, leave the policy as drafted.
okay, we'll have a second.
Well, I
Second.
guess we do need a second.
Yeah, I do need a second. Okay. She seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
No. Okay, now,
Okay, the next one is the cameras in the regional centers, and again, the first one is the comments that were received publicly, but during public input, and some of those, I don't remember which ones, we adapted their change, and then some of them we did not, because we felt that the policy was specific enough as it was written. So you've all had an opportunity, I assume, to read this one. Okay, so on behalf of the policy committee, I make a motion that the policy requiring the use of surveillance video cameras in DDSN regional centers be passed.
second,
Second.
needs no second.
Doesn't really need one.
Doesn't need,
committee.
coming from committee, it needs a second, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
The last thing we did was discussed, a robust discussion about cameras in community settings. And Mary had done some research and found that there weren't many agencies or entities requiring cameras in community settings, that there were in other states in regional centers. So the questions that we feel that we can't move forward requiring the cameras in the community centers until we have more information. That was the outcome of the committee discussion. And so we asked specifically for these things to be answered, this list of 8 questions, which the commission can add to, take away anything you don't think we need. Basically, national trends and what type of programs have the highest level of A&Es? Are we talking about CTHs? Are we talking about in the vans, early intervention? Just where, what location? What locations or providers have the highest rates of A&Es? What percentage of clients involved in A&Es are nonverbal? And on that location of providers, we might want to add one more step, which is how many of those are high management facilities? I don't know that that would help us, but it might. What percentage of A&Es have taken place when cameras have been in place? And because it's hard to prove a negative, some will argue that cameras don't deter, but it's hard to prove a negative. I think if we have the percentage when they have been in place, maybe we can make some comparisons, maybe not. What are the costs involved? What type of cameras, video, audio? What are the requirements we need in place when cameras are used? So the bottom line is we don't feel that we're able to make a recommendation to the full commission at this time on community cameras because we just don't have enough information.
Okay.
I don't know if everybody's in agreement with that.
All right,
What do you think, Eva? You're the camera.
the camera, I agree with what y'all have, y'all have done the research. Until we do the research, I agree with you, that's fine. I am glad that we're gonna have them in the regional centers, just because we've had some incidents that I think would have come to light if we'd had cameras, so, especially because we have more, well, I don't know if we have more, but we do have a lot of people who are nonverbal in the regional centers. So I think that's great, and we'll move on with that at another date when we get some more information. Gary, you have any thoughts?
You know, in my business, cameras are everywhere now, and they solve a lot more problems. They're body cams.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not ever going to get to that stage. There is the big difference, and it's always been my biggest concern, is it's a balancing act. It's a balancing act of security versus privacy, that our consumers have the right not to be videoed. You know, and family members want them to be safe, and consumers want to have some privacy. And it's a real balancing act. I think it's a good start. I think it gives us some data points by starting in the regional centers. It's not 100% that it transfers, but it really is a very, very difficult balancing act. And I talk with my relative that has those issues, and she doesn't want a camera in her place. I understand why. She wants privacy. There have been times when stuff's happened when we've been like, it would have been really nice to know exactly what happened, but she's got a right to have that privacy. Yeah, I think that we need to keep pushing forward, but we need to do it in an informed fashion. So I think these are excellent questions to ask, and I think everybody needs to know this is just not something we can precipitously say yes. It's got to be.
Is that temptation?
It would be very, very easy, and it's just, this is a difficult area.
Yeah.
And it's one that pulls me in two different directions, because I like people's privacy, but I also like security. So I think that what the committee has done so far is a good start, and I think getting those data points is a good way to do it, and seeing what happens in the regional centers is a good way.
It's going to take a good bit more work before.
It is.
Absolutely.
It is. I mean, it's to do it right as opposed to doing it hasty. And that doesn't take away the awareness of we got to keep on working on all fronts. This is one front.
And we're not preventing any providers from putting them in. You know, there are providers out there who have already.
Yeah, right. Well, we've had some really good projects that are basically based around camera systems. I visited some where I can't remember what the exact name of the program is, but
In the cloud?
The cloud, that's it, right? Yeah, where that has, with the consent of the consumers, has been very effective. So I mean, we have some programs that make extensive use of cameras and communication systems like that already. Not exactly under this circumstance, but they're already out there. So I agree with what the committee's doing, I guess, is the bottom line at this stage.
Try to answer those questions.
Yeah.
Slow and steady.
That's all I have.
Great, thank you very much, appreciate it. All right, Mary.
Okay, well, thank you, and I appreciate Susan bringing her concerns to the commission, but the waiver case management, which is basically a waiver service for case managers to be able to include a few more items that were not normally included in the Medicaid targeted case management array of services. Basically, they can do more with management of the actual waiver. That manual is near completion. We'll bring it to you as soon as it is clear to come to be looked at. And the rate structure is going to be a challenge. I don't think anybody has said that it isn't. But truthfully, the numbers that we're living with and the knowledge of this, the talking about this rate change has been since 2014. This is not a new subject matter. I know that while I was a provider, Pat had spoke to the commission quite frequently about the amount of how much DDSN was getting paid versus how much was being paid out to providers. And so looking at this has been going on it's not new, let's put it that way. During that time, we've solicited input from providers, passed on the information to HHS to try to see if we can change that rate. And providers have actually made their case directly to HHS, and I was one of those providers who did that. And since we were meeting with the agency at that time when we formulated the rates, the only thing that's not been done is actually implementing the rates. So we haven't actually started the implementation of those rates yet. And that is scheduled to happen on July 1. And what I'm saying next is, as a former provider and an actual case manager, I used to be a case manager back in the day. So I believe this has the potential to improve case management because it allows case managers to have more time. And when we talk to providers about how to change business models, we've been doing the same thing for the same way for a very long time. And one of those things are we only had to have one billable service a month to get our monthly fee. So no matter what we did, we might not be documenting as much as we should have been documenting because it wasn't really necessary as long as we had that one billable activity documented. So now we have to get our case managers in the mindset, whatever you do, you need to document. And that is a little bit of a new business thought. The other thing is we tend to spread our caseloads out. In fact, we actually had a number. You had to have between 45 cases or 50 cases. We actually had a specific number for folks to have to have on their caseload to have a full caseload. And at this point, if I was looking at my caseloads, I'd be looking at what are people doing versus how many cases they have. So if I had somebody with a lot of residential individuals, that caseload would be higher because you can go and visit more at one time. And the needs are not as difficult to meet because you're in a residential program, they're getting their health care, and I would load that caseload up. Whereas if I've got folks that are in the community, and this sounds counterintuitive because the rate's lower, I would lower the caseload, allowing them more time to get that work, to sit with that family and talk to them. And as I go around the state, I'm listening to families and I'm hearing things like, I think I have a waiver. I'm not sure what it is. So I think there's an opportunity here to improve the knowledge base of our families, to expand that because we have now more time to sit with them and talk to them about this and to bill for it. Because when it all came down to trying to figure out what we did different than other case managers that work with the mentally ill, that work with folks that are elderly, what do we do that is so different? And it came down to our people are different and how much time it takes to actually get folks to understand this complicated system. And it just takes more, and it takes a lot of repetition. And when I brought that to HHS, I said, okay, what do we do with this one? We're going to have to repeat it 10 times. Mr. Baker said bill for it. So that opportunity opens up to 40 units, is quite a bit, that you can actually earn more if you at least bill half of your day. So if I'm a case manager, I work 8 hours a day, 4 of those hours need to be actual billable service. And we make more money than I'm making now from the rate that we're currently getting. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. It's not, because it's really hard to change something you've been doing for 30 years. But this is not a new idea. It's been here since 2014. We just have never flipped the switch on it. I hate to think people aren't going to make it. I think that if when push comes to shove, when you have to do this to make ends meet, that it can be done. Since the only variable we have not tested is the actual rate implementation. So everything else is supposition at this point. I just do have to thank some folks though. We have a case management committee and there's been some really frank discussions. The first time we met, it was almost 3 hours of, we ain't doing this. We can't do this. It's never going to work. But by the second meeting, it was, what can we do to try to make it work? And we saw some folks starting to really have that realization that the change is going to happen and what do we need to do to make this work? And just, I heard what was said today on behalf of the Human Service Provider Organization, but I also want to thank them because they're going to have a roundtable discussion at their conference to be able to actually talk about strategies on how do you make this work? How are we going to make this work? So I think at some point, the only way to test the last variable is to do the last variable, is to test it. So basically, the analysis that we've done, that I did as a provider, says my caseworkers have to bill half of their day. And there's going to be some days they can only bill maybe 2 hours because of other stuff going on, but there's going to be some days they bill almost all day long. So it's an average. But I think saying you need to work 50% of your day is not something that is,
Let me ask you this.
yeah.
Okay, first of all, are we ready with TheraP when it comes to billing? Or is TheraP helping people to, in other words, they're not manually trying to track all these activities, are they?
No, it's coming through. It generates
There's a
the
billing
billables. Yes, there's a
tag
billing.
part of TheraP? A billing
Yes.
portion of it? Okay. And the commission has not approved this rate, correct?
Well, it's been on the books since 2014, so I don't know. I can't tell you that, I don't think you had a vote or anything on it, but this is a rate that is published by HHS.
Well,
Have they not given us
I
a
want
raise
us,
on it?
if we're, the
That's
thing
part of the
is
Mercer
we
report.
should be voting on any rate changes. We should be voting on anything that affects people like when the WAD came in and, all that respite care mess. We didn't vote on any of that changing taking place, and I
Right.
know you weren't here. But this is about to go into effect in July, and we don't even know what the rate is as a commission. And, HHS didn't ask us what we thought. They might have asked everybody else. But I think we need to tell them anyway. So,
Okay.
I would like for us to look at that and kind of have a summary of how it was justified. We can't govern in the dark. That's just
Right.
not the way we need to.
Has the commission, I'm not familiar with this, has the commission voted on rates in the past?
I don't know.
The only rates we voted on is for direct care workers.
Yeah, because we have
Right, 'cause you asked for a raise.
indirectly
Yeah, we
because of
asked
the
for a raise.
bans. You know what I'm saying? We vote on the contracts. But now that we're going to something, it's a little bit different. We need to also be involved in making those decisions. And finally, I would say that, when as a commission, we decided we couldn't run the PPD program well, I think it was the PPD program. Which one was it?
PDD, the ABA therapy?
Yeah, and we said, there's not enough money. We can't pay people what we need to pay people. We're out. What Susan is saying is some providers are saying that same thing, that they may just say we're out. So my concern is, do we have people in place to pick that piece up?
There are private providers out there that believe they can do it, yeah.
Do we have any kind of estimate of, providers who are saying, I don't think we can do this, or?
Well, it's mostly boards that are saying they can do it.
And really, realistically, should they be doing it?
Yeah, I was gonna ask about there's an
Well,
element of the conflict.
yeah,
stuff.
and-
There
and-
is.
But
I mean,
that
you
is,
know, but
that
do
is
we have
true.
a substitute in place?
That's
Are we
always-
ready for that transition?
Right, that's always been the quite weird, and the answer to that, I think, is clearly no. 'Cause
Right.
Yeah, well, the conflict-free, we still don't have any dates on that, Gary.
Right,
So
yeah.
like I said in York, we were never getting ready to get out of the business because we were never told when that date would be. So there was just, and that is that's another HHS decision as far as the conflict-free part of it.
Just like the HHS thing is.
But what you
Right.
have are providers robbing from Peter to pay Paul to support things like case management. And I'm assuming that's still going to be the case. So, I mean, at some point, they may just say,
Forget it.
I'm done with that.
And they might, but it also could, for some folks, it is an opportunity to actually make money. Because at the rate that you're given and the units you can have, you can earn between $160 and $200 a month per case, which is what they're only getting is $138 now. So at some point, I would look at this, if I was a provider, as a chance to actually make money in case management, just like we did in EI.
Well, I think if there's anything that we can do to facilitate their being able to bill, their being able to document on a computer so that the
Yeah.
billing is easier, any way that we can say, okay, if you do this, it automatically will pull up procedure A, B, and C, or 1, 2, 3, or whatever it is, and then you bill for those procedures. So, I mean, that's how we can help. If there's something that is available that we're not giving them as a resource, and we need to fund it. I don't know
Again,
if that's true or not.
the billable units are being tallied through the current case management system of TheraP. Yeah, and they are working on a automated authorization process so that they don't have to get up and fax authorizations. That is a matter of just sending an email or sending a.
So I guess I'm saying
electronic.
I've used billing software and I've used billing software. Some's good, some stinks. So do we have our best foot forward here on this?
Well, we have Thera.
So we don't have our best foot.
I'm not saying anything. I don't do case management in Thera, so I've never done it.
Well, I mean, it's
But-
February and it starts July 1st evidently, so we don't have a lot of time, but we need to be making sure that we are ready, and if we're not, we need to be backing it up.
Yeah, I agree that, we didn't set it, HHS set it. We
didn't set the deadline.
The issue.
They set, and I was gonna say, did HHS set that, where did
No, they wanted it a lot
they wanted
sooner.
it a lot sooner. So
The issue
pushed
is
back
this.
what we have.
Apparently, this was written into a SPA, a plan amendment that was sent to CMS way back when. And it just sat there. And in defense of providers, which I have to do, the DDSN, we talked about production for quite a few years when that SPA first went out. We first started talking about 15-minute units. We talked about production all the time. And then all of a sudden, it went silent. And we didn't hear anything about production. So frankly, as the case man, I had other fish to fry, to be perfectly frank. So I was working on other things, residential indicators, all that kind of stuff. And I didn't think about, do I need to look at my business model? So I left service coordination, case management, status quo. Then all of a sudden, when Pat came on board, I believe that's when the issue of, oh my goodness, the SPA was approved. I can't tell you what year, was it 2017? Pat, the SPA?
I think it goes back to 2012 or 13. They just had to clean it up.
Right, but when the SPA was actually approved and sent back to HHS saying, okay, you should be at this rate by now. Well, what the problem is CMS is anticipating that we are paying that rate. So every day that we don't do this, there's a liability ticking of potential, recoupable.
Right, they come back to it and say, oh, by the way, you've been doing this wrong, pay us.
Yes, exactly, because we haven't been doing it.
The point being is we didn't necessarily make all the sandwich, but we're the ones having to eat the sandwich.
We are.
And when we hear about the tsunami that's coming,
Well,
we just, there's certainly the concern. It's one of these things where the switch is getting turned on. I don't know that we can stop the switch based on where we're at because of that liability. But we have to have the support in place. We have to, well, I mean, then there's another liability that down the road.
There may be, but here's the thing. We've gone around and we've gotten everybody's input, but I mean, maybe there is a plan that has been put in place to transition from a, advance payment to a retroactive payment when they bill and all that stuff. I assume we've asked for one-time money for providers to help them be able to make that transition, or have we just said July 1st?
no, we have not asked for money for that.
Well,
But we are doing analysis of who can withstand to wait for the check versus who can't, basically by what's cash on hand.
well, I mean, I would have thought that since 2014, and we should have, I should have known about it. I should have stepped up and said something about it. But the thing is we should have clawed back less money at the end of the year and given people an opportunity to store up a little bit. And more has been.
We have been.
We have been going back. That was because Tony kicked.
We have not been clawing back money, and they've been able to keep 10% of their band payment, which is significant. I know in York, that went in the bank
But only
to
if you're-
prepare for this.
Right, but
So-
only if there were so many out there when we did that study that don't have anything in the bank. That were doing, paycheck to paycheck thing. So do we have any kind of an estimate of, are they telling you they're ready, or what are they gonna do, borrow
We've
it?
got some saying they're not ready, and we have others saying they are, but we're gonna need to do an analysis as to where the cash on hand is to see if we need to float a loan.
In between now and July 1st?
When are we gonna do that?
That's being done now. I mean, Pat's going through, as we're looking through the Band Is and Band Bs, we're looking at all of these issues and to see who's healthy and who's not. But honestly,
I just wish if it was July 1st that we had a plan with milestones where we could say, okay, this is this and this is how much that's gonna cost and this is what we're gonna do. And I just don't want to get to July 2nd and have a problem.
Right. Well, again,
If there's a way, if we find that we're out there and it's going to be too much cost, what are we going to back up the date? What's our,
I think the liability is ours to
Do we have
take,
a
is what I
plan
heard
B?
from HHS.
well,
And we can keep taking the hit on that. But if they're losing money at $138 a month per caseload, why would you not take the opportunity to try to earn more?
I don't know. Why wouldn't we do a why wouldn't they ask us for a cost report? We're losing more money that way for DDSN. I mean, they haven't asked us for that. We haven't submitted them, and there you go.
Well,
So,
we've done 2016 stuff.
oh, good.
So I think that, again,
Oh, well, if we're ready, we're ready.
well, people are saying they're not ready, and I'm
That's what I'm
saying,
hearing.
but I want to watch how I say this, but the truth is, if you've been allowed to keep 10% of the monies coming out of those Band Bs and Band Is, and there should have been money put up for this, because we've known about this since 2014. That proviso's been in place since then. So a person who is running a business should be looking at these issues and should be planning accordingly.
From my perspective as a commissioner, it's different from yours in York. You were financially healthy in York. What we saw a couple of years ago when they did the study was there were a whole bunch of people who were not financially healthy.
Lots.
So, I mean, my perspective is different from yours, and I'm saying there is no 10%. They didn't get 10% because they didn't,
Yeah, well,
they didn't net 10%. So I'm just concerned about the numbers and the plan. I don't see a concrete thing in place, but maybe I just don't know what it is, and maybe it's taken care of. But it's concerning to me that we would be this far along. We haven't voted on the rate. Here it is. Like you said, eat it, Gary. I mean,
Well, I'm sorry you haven't voted on the rate, and I really was not aware that you were to vote on HHS rates. But if you are, then we need to have that discussion.
Well, we do, because
Okay.
as we transition from band to direct rates, governing body needs to vote on what we're asking people and contracting with people to do and how much money we're giving them to do that. HHS doesn't get to decide that by themselves. I know that they're the CMS agency, but we're the governing body.
Right,
I mean,
I
I hate
understand
it,
that.
but until they change state law, that's the way it is.
But I mean, ultimately, our option is to say, no, we don't. I mean,
We don't set rates.
we don't set the rate. And we can do what we did with the autism side of things and say we're not doing this, period.
Well, don't you think we might have to on occasion? I mean, I hope we
when
don't
we
have to
did,
do
I
it
mean,
again,
Yeah,
but we might.
yeah. I'm just saying that can't, I mean, when you say vote on the rates, I mean, basically we can vote to do our job or
Yeah.
not consider that part of our job.
I don't really want to
I don't-
take all the crap and then not get a say in how it's being done,
I mean, yes, that's the sandwich analogy.
Okay, I'm done.
Come on.
For now.
You need to direct me as to how you want me to approach HHS about this too. I'd be more than happy to do that. It's not that I haven't engaged them on this issue many, many times
So I mean,
before.
if we, the first question is are we going to make a vote somehow to push back the flip of the switch? How was the July 1st date set? If I can ask that question, as far as the switch being turned.
Just to have the clean start of a
Eight-
fiscal year instead of starting in the middle of the year, because they really want to start in like in April.
Okay, so basically it was this fiscal year we're gonna start doing this, is where it came from.
And somebody help me. I mean, we've been talking about it since I've been on this board, and it gets pushed back every year. Now, what's the realization that's gonna happen this year?
I think it's pretty real, because we've got a CMS-approved spot out there, which is saying this is your rate. So the feds are saying we're only going to match this much.
So you think it definitely was, because I know it was supposed to happen, 2 or 3 years it was gonna happen,
Yeah.
and nothing ever happened.
I know.
And then we
got
never talked
complacent.
about it again.
And that is the crux of the matter. When you keep sitting back thinking, oh, this is not going to happen, this is not going to happen. I mean, Gary, to be honest, we've been talking about conflict-free case management since 1993, since I was a case manager. So it's like, after a while, you just think that these things are just not, it's going to blow, this too shall pass. And I think at this point, they're sitting with an approved SPA with the rate written in it, because we were doing a step-down rate, and then somehow we got stuck at that 75-25 match part. We never went to 50-50 to 25-75, then to the rate. We never did the step-down. And so, again, complacency sits in, and now it's like panic time, we can't do this.
Okay, well, but can we start with, all right, here is our next month, can you bring us a roadmap? And that is like, all right, this is how many providers need contract amendments. And I don't know about loans, but we could go there, I guess. And then, you know, how many providers need to lower their caseload so that what we're asking them to do is doable and they're billable? And so are they going to have enough case managers in place to get that done? Are they going to have to hire more people? It's almost like they need to have a plan to transition. We need to have a plan to transition. I don't see a good plan, but maybe there is one and we just haven't looked at it. And then at some point, yeah, we want to know how that rate was arrived at, and can providers function on that rate? Give us, you know, some kind of this is how much the costs are going to be on average. This is how much the payment is going to be. And if you build this way through there, then you should be financially solvent. Because the last thing we need are 10 boards with insolvent case management programs and nobody to perform that service, just because we're determined we're not going to put it past July 1. I just would like to see something a little more concrete. And if we can, we can. If we can't, we can't. But we should try for that.
Well, and from my standpoint, well, that's good. It just is, is a closing the loop sort of scenario, is once the switch is turned on, everything right now is a guess. I mean, and so we really don't know.
Well,
So
I'm afraid.
the ability to come back 6 months. In other words, this is something that we need to stay on top of from an update.
Yes, all the, yes, to make sure
To
that.
say, okay, and then we get 6 months into it, and this is turned into a huge black hole, and it's a real problem. Then we can talk about, okay,
Push back.
yeah, we have to turn the switch off.
And my concern.
But do we try it? And I mean, I feel like to a certain extent we need some actual data of the actual consequence of it.
And then how much of a self-fulfilling prophecy have we got where people are just going to say, well, and I know I can't do it, so I'm not even going to. Because this is some serious effort that has to be made into doing this. I mean, managers have to really manage this.
Yeah.
I mean, they have to stay on top of it. And when we look at what is the plan for caseloads, do they have enough? I have no idea. It's got to be an individualized plan. They have to come up with it, because I don't know who their consumers are. So,
I mean,
you know.
we don't have to do, I mean, I'm just throwing this out, but if we go through this plan and we say, okay, these 10 are not ready, these 5 are, July 1, can we do these 5? I mean, is that even a possibility that those that are ready can, and those that aren't? I mean, York's already doing it.
No, our percentages are bad. We took up EI. They're billing over 100%. It's the case managers, but Michelle's got a plan. She came with it yesterday.
Yeah.
So
so
how long do we prop up people who are not going to do the work necessary to even try this to see if it would work or not? Because that really is
because they've got to try it with a plan. Like Michelle has, she's got to see how it's going to work for her. And every provider has to see how it's going to work for them. And if they can't give you that plan, then why do we think it's just going to happen? I mean.
And then what, I guess conversely saying, how long do we keep holding somebody up if they're not going to do the management the way they need to be doing the management?
And that's always been a fight between the boards, that board A is getting propped up. That's got to be the case, right? I'm doing all this hard work and I'm breaking even. Board B is not doing any work and they're in a hole, and DDSN keeps. We're going to go right back to the whole favoritism thing that we hate.
Because I thought we were getting out of that business.
Yeah. I mean, it's just.
Well, I don't mind getting out of that business for sure when people aren't doing their jobs and meeting their staff ratios in residential or something like that. But if they're telling us there's a tsunami coming, you know, and then I'm thinking that we need to look at our approach, and you need to come back and say, we're solid on this. The plan in here is that, the plan in here is that, and you're not gonna be able to do that.
Well, I'm not gonna be able to ever say someone's solid out there. I mean, there's providers that I don't think I can say that. I think we can talk about, again, helping people with ideas and giving them all the technical assistance they need to try to come up with something if they can't do it on their own. But,
So the worst case scenario is a provider says, I'm getting out of this business.
yep, and then we just bring that to HHS and maybe they change their minds.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
and then, okay, so, all right, so worst case, let me just follow my worst case scenario, all right? Worst case scenario is somebody says, this is not financially viable for this organization, we are getting out of this business. Then the question really becomes, and I think the question the thing we really need to look at is are our consumers being served properly?
Right.
Because if a board gets out of the business, but there are private providers out there who decide that they can do it and they're still getting the services.
And that's fine.
Okay, the board's is losing that source of income, but our consumers are still getting served and HHS is still doing their thing. I mean, we obviously have very differing views as well on the private providers and what they can do. We have to keep trying, we have to keep our eye on that as well. I mean,
and case management is important for compliance with
It is.
waiver
Yep.
requirements. I mean, it's extremely important.
The bottom line is, are the consumers getting what they need?
But,
That's the
and that's where I see the chance to make an impact. When we had to, EI is going fee for service also, early intervention. Now, private providers already they do early intervention in that manner. We honestly thought it was going that way years ago. So we started talking to our EIs and telling them in York, you need to make up your visits. If you've only got people that only want to be seen twice a month, we're going to give you more children. We basically pretended as if we were doing fee for service. And that one we stayed on top of. And they are billing more. DDSN is able to bill more than they pay York for that service. So they can actually make money there if we were fee for service. And so, and the relationships with the families improved. There wasn't as much as switching around of EIs as there used to be. We didn't lose families to other providers. And when HHS pulled all the calculations for case management, they were saying that we were providing 6 hours of case management, an average, per year for people. That's a very small number of hours. So again, started thinking about, well, it requires me to go every quarter to do a family visit. Well, I think I'm going to go every other month. I think I'm going to do more. I think I'm going to spend more time, and I'm going to bill for it. So the potential of also increasing the quality of service might be here, because now you need to spend the time so you can bill the time. And that is what our folks need, is time.
So you mentioned that we might have to loan some people some money.
I don't know. I mean, we have to look at that. We have to look at the bottom line. We have not done that yet.
Because we don't have a lot of money.
No, we have
this year.
Because it's all sitting out there in those Band Bs and Band Is.
Well, there's no room, there's no wiggle room.
Yeah.
So we don't even know if we can do it because we don't if we
Right.
have the money to loan them. So let's start with next month. You bring back more information.
I'll try to. Yeah, I'll try to do the best I can with this.
And obviously the providers got groups working this. I mean, this problem needs to be worked pretty hard between now and July.
Yeah.
But, and I think.
And we also need to get the new service up and running, because that waiver case management, the requirements in there require you to do more. So that also gives you more opportunities to bill.
So our software's got to be prepared for that.
Yeah, they're doing those changes now.
Oh, God.
Okay. Do y'all have any other?
We're not ready.
Anything else to discuss about this?
Not
Amira, do you have some more on your,
Well, not anymore.
anything else you want to discuss?
Yeah, I just wanted to say the respite and PCA assessments, they've been revised and they've been vetted through the providers, HHS, and through the commission. And training was delivered earlier this month, and they're uploaded in Business Tools. Guidance is in there. And we've got a memo going out to all the providers today to say that the to let them know the clear lines of communication with the waiver division, and if any questions about those assessments before we move forward. And as always, all denials are seen through me. Okay? Risk management, we had our first meeting. We've sent, as a result, because of review of the cases that we've had, we've sent instructions to regional center administrators to increase unannounced visits, utilize all level of supervisions, and be out visible in the programs on a regular basis, and to report all documentation being sent back to the director. The centers are going to be hiring additional training staff to provide on-the-spot training, pop quizzes, and orientation classes nights and weekends to facilitate the vacancy issue, to fill up the vacancies. We sent a letter to each and every staff member speaking about the causes of abuse, learning to manage themselves, and offering additional training and support. And I'm meeting with the regional staff members on Monday to model the risk management concept so they can take it and drill it down even further out at the providers I'm trying to edit. Governor McMaster has proclaimed February 2019 as Vulnerable Adult Awareness Month. Now, as far as the budget update, the House Ways and Means Committee has published their budget recommendations. The reoccurring funds are $10.4 million to fund the DSP dollar raise and compression pay that we requested, and $140,000 to fund the transition of children in DSS custody and CTH1 programs. And that was it.
All right. Thank you very much. Mary, you want to talk about the Legislative Oversight Committee update?
Actually, nothing has changed from last month except for the approval of this policy.
Okay.
We'll add that, and we'll just make, I don't think it's going to be a problem to say that, you know, the commission has changed, and following the rules mean that you have reasonable debate and no one gets shut down.
All right, great. Ann Dalton, would you quarterly quality management report, please? Thank you.
So I have the routine quarterly report for incident management available to you guys, and you received a copy in advance. The report will follow the traditional format. As we get started this morning, we will be covering the regional center trends for abuse, neglect, and exploitation. The chart you have before you has the 5-year trend data for allegations of abuse, neglect, and exploitation. Each of the dark blue bars has the total number of abuse allegations for each fiscal year. And I am pleased to report that as we look at the annualized number for fiscal year 19, we do see that the rate is holding steady. We have the standard of care allegations that have been verified there in the green line that you have. And the number of arrests are shown with the orange bar there. As Ms. McPherson noted earlier today, we did have an arrest back in January for an incident that occurred in July at one of our regional centers. So our annualized rate is currently 2. As we move forward and look at the community residential program, we also have a slight decline in the number of allegations that have been reported thus far in fiscal year 19. The dark blue bars show the rate of allegations over the last 5 years. The lighter blue is the annualized rate for fiscal year 19. We had 226 allegations through the end of December. Our rate of standard of care allegations has also decreased quite a bit at this point. We're at 72 through that same time period. And our annualized rate is 8, which is a significant decrease from where we were for fiscal year 18. As we've discussed before, fiscal year 18 was an extraordinary year when you look at the frequency and the types of abuse cases or the arrests that were reported. But we're well within our range for the 5-year averages at this point, and certainly we do hope that that trend will continue. As you look at the next slide, you'll see that our 4 arrests for this fiscal year in residential and also with 1 arrest in day programs, they have resulted from staff who struck a consumer. We have not had any arrest at this point for failure to report, but I have noticed a trend among the SLED intake reports that we're receiving. SLED is noting that failure to report more frequently on the intakes. Previously, we were catching it at DDSN as we would review the internal reports, and we would follow up with the providers noting the failure to report. But SLED is actually catching it and making note of it for law enforcement to follow up. So that's an interesting trend that we have observed.
So, hang on, I'm sorry.
Sure.
So on the frequency, we've had, under arrests, we've had 4.
That is an interesting point. We have had 4 arrests. I have been told verbally by one of our provider agencies that one of the staff that was arrested, once they were processed, law enforcement will be dropping the charges, but I don't have any written confirmation on that, so I'm still reporting it as an arrest. As commission members, you all received information on all 4 of those previously.
So there were 8 in the community and 2 in the regional centers. Arrests?
There have been 4 in the community residential programs. There has been 1 arrest in a day program, a community operated day program.
So annualized, is that where it comes in?
And then we have 1 in the regional center.
Okay.
I did not prepare a chart for day services because the frequency of allegations and arrests are traditionally very low. Any other questions about that? Or about the chart with the frequency? Within your packet, you have a summary of the 4 arrests, 4 cases that have resulted in arrest. We've had an arrest where a person was struck in the day program. We have the incident that Ms. McPherson described in a community residential setting earlier this year in the regional center. You also have a breakout for the deaths that have occurred in both regional centers and the community residential programs. There have been 39 deaths within our community residential settings for the first half of fiscal year 19, and there have been 17 deaths in the regional centers. At the end of your packet, you have a couple of different charts that break out the age range for the individuals that have passed away, the types of diagnoses that they may have had, and whether the deaths actually occurred within the hospital, hospice, or at their home setting. I noted on one of the charts there at the end regarding the deaths that approximately 30 to 35 people in the community setting were diagnosed either with a terminal illness or they were receiving end-of-life care. I wanted to point out that that also factors in under the respiratory illnesses. We have people that have chronic COPD. They have a number of instances of aspiration pneumonia, or they may have congestive heart failure and had a short-term life expectancy based on those recent diagnoses. With regard to the critical incidents, rate is down for this fiscal year. We're currently looking at a rate per 100 at 10.1 within community settings and 18 for the regional centers. Our population within the regional centers has gone down, so I do want to point that out. And as we look at the next slide, I included this for your information because DDSN actually tracks about 25 different types of incidents. Most have been transferred to FARA through the general event reporting. But on the slide that you have here, we have what we consider our higher priority based on the type and frequency. This slide shows a trend analysis of the critical incidents that we are closely monitoring. And I wanted to point out that while we have moved your routine episodes of aggression to FARA, the number of incidents from aggression that are now reported require law enforcement intervention has dramatically increased. We're at 243 reports for this fiscal year. as compared to 159 for the statewide average. So a point that we are monitoring. We're also looking at choking incidents, which have increased, and these are annualized numbers, but if the trend continues, we're looking at a big spike based on prior years. The number of restraints that have resulted in an injury, and the number of suicidal threats are also up. So we continue to monitor these particular issues. We're looking for trends that can help us as we are monitoring the residential habilitation services, conducting residential observation, and also looking at behavioral supports.
What's covered under law enforcement intervention? I mean, that's obviously, that's not all arrests. Is that just anytime law enforcement is called out? Or what does that mean?
If a person is displaying serious physical aggression, then the provider may need assistance from law enforcement. If they only have one staff in the home and they're worried about the protection of other people in the home, then they may call law enforcement.
Okay.
You guys have heard a little about the residential observation process that we currently employ with Alliant. We do have Alliant going out to 25% of all residential settings at this point, and they are doing an on-site review. They are talking to staff and consumers as they go out to do these visits. The slide that you have here documents some of the findings that we have, and I think it's really interesting that these findings back up some of the findings that we have noted within the file review for residential habilitation, and also some of the HCDS settings rule documentation that we've seen. So through the end of December, 5 out of 132 providers had reports that documented the person said they felt unsafe because of the staff working in the home. 9 consumers said they felt unsafe due to a roommate situation. When this happens, Alliant notifies DDSN, and we take action with the provider immediately. So there is no lag time if a person expresses a concern with safety. In 3 out of 132 cases, there were reports where the person reported information that resulted in an allegation of abuse or neglect. Now, I am pleased to say that those allegations had been previously reported and vetted out to the appropriate entity. What I think we all find a little more alarming is that in almost 30% of the residential observations that have been conducted, Alliant found that consumers were not receiving assistance with the acquisition, retention, or improvement of skills necessary to live in the community. So this is your basic residential habilitation that Medicaid pays for within our service system. Medicaid is not paying for room and board, they're paying for the training that is provided. So in almost 30% of the on-site observations, they're finding that training is not taking place as it should. They've also found that in 36% of cases or observations that people were not being supported to learn about their rights. And we're finding this documentation is very consistent with the file reviews, and also as we're reviewing the compliance action plans for the settings rule, people are not doing the training as we would typically expect. It's more of a once and done approach where they may be providing training when the person goes through the initial orientation, or they may be doing annual training, but they're not taking a more vigorous approach and training the staff and training people that are supported. Some are doing a really good job, but
I just want to interrupt. I was doing my report on risk management, initiation of risk management procedures here. We really do have to determine what indicators drive performance. When we measure things, what are we going to do to improve performance? That's the ultimate goal. It's not just to measure things, it's to improve stuff. So we have to have discussions, and we're starting with a quality management team tomorrow of providers and staff to lead to a system that clearly lays out expectation, requirements that drive performance. And we have to establish clear and unambiguous actions for providers who choose not to improve their performance. So we have to have markers as to where you want to be. We'll help you how to get there, but if you choose not to, how do we say you can't be a provider here anymore? That discussion has to happen. I do have one question about the law enforcement numbers that are so high. Do you have any, do you keep data on how many of those law enforcement calls are actually consumer generated?
No, I do not have.
Okay, because I would think that would be an interesting number to know, because we're finding that our consumers are calling more often than staff are. And, you know, if somebody does them wrong, they call. If they don't like breakfast, sometimes they call. But frequently, police will not do a report for that. So we need to figure out, you know, and as rights training increase, calls to law enforcement are going to also increase too. It's just kind of a natural progression of things. Sorry.
So the next slide is also, I think, pretty telling in terms of where we are within our system. And I think it has a big impact on the rate of abuse, neglect, and exploitation allegations that we see in our system. We have a key indicator within our Alliant review that specifically targets the A&E training that is provided for residential staff. And consistent with the residential observations where people may not be able to explain how to report abuse, we're finding when we do the records check that in fiscal year 18, 42.5% of providers were cited as being non-compliant with A&E training. So far in the first 6 months of fiscal year 19, 2/3 of providers are not compliant. Now, I think it's always important when you look at numbers to look at the full context. So let me provide a little bit of background at this point, because I think those numbers are pretty shocking. When you look at this total, some providers didn't have 2 signatures on the test. So they had the person taking the test, but they didn't have the proxy who was there to guide and documenting the training. Our directive says you need to have 2 signatures. It might seem really picky that you do. But we've also heard a rumor or two that some providers are actually giving out the answer key. So we want to make sure that people are actually getting the training that they're supposed to have. We also need a score in that test. Again, it might seem really picky to say you need a score documented on the test. But our directive says that if you don't score 80%, that you need to be retrained, that someone needs to sit down with you and explain to you what you missed. So, you know, there are pros and cons to that system, but I wanted to make sure that you understood the full scope. As far as other training that is required for residential service or service providers, we're also missing the boat there in terms of enforcing the training. 62.5% of our providers did not receive the other training that they need. And a critical component there is the crisis management curriculum. You know, that would be part of that additional training that's required. So that's 25 of 40 providers that were reviewed. For the current fiscal year, we're looking at 16 of 24 providers that have not had that additional training that is required.
So this is really the non-compliance rate,
Yeah.
not the compliance rate.
Well,
it's misleading the way it's presented.
16 of 24 providers, I'm sorry, I said it wrong. 16 of 24 providers were compliant. So 2/3 were compliant.
Okay.
That's very different.
Okay.
Now that makes better sense.
Okay. Yeah, so it's a 66 compliance rate, which is still
Yes.
not great, but it's a lot better than 66 not.
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
But keep in mind, these are specific indicators that are measured for waiver compliance. So they are reported to CMS for each of our waiver operations. Now, the next indicator that I pulled out here has to do with the residential plan, that residential habilitation plan for each person. 80.9% of our providers were fully compliant with this particular indicator. There were, out of 221 files, individual files pulled throughout our system, 177 were compliant. For the current fiscal year, out of 131 individual files that were reviewed, there were 103 that were fully compliant. When Alliant is going out to do the residential observation visits, they're finding that staff often don't know what they're supposed to do in terms of skills training and supervision. And when staff don't know what they're supposed to do in that regard, and they don't know how to help people express their rights or learn about the rights that are important to them, and they haven't been trained on abuse, that's where I believe we're running into problems and our numbers of abuse allegations continue to increase. So those are things that we're continuing to monitor. As we have indicated to you previously in our presentations, we have a plan in place to work with providers. You received a copy of a presentation that was shared with providers back in January. Mary sent out a memo to address the rising number of arrests within our system. So we're doing that as an awareness training immediately. And we will continue to provide information on those individual vignettes for arrest. We are also revising the abuse training curriculum. The curriculum that is currently in place was a recommendation from the Legislative Audit Committee back in 2014. They felt that we needed a standardized training curriculum, and the Adult Protection Coordinating Council has developed the curriculum. We are in the process of simplifying that format and having a training available for direct support, having a separate training available for middle management, and yet another training available for executive staff because they're the ones processing all the reports in our system. As Mary talked about, improving the risk management process, pursuing additional DSP recruitment, wage enhancements, establishing a policy regarding the use of cameras, and then re-emphasizing the oversight and training related to our residential services. We have a mechanism in place to inform providers of the expectations, but as you can see, many of the providers are not quite there. And there's a wide disparity. You know, some are doing very well in meeting the standards. They're scoring 100 in their contract compliance reviews. But we have some other providers that need a lot of assistance at this point.
And if they do score 100, it doesn't necessarily mean they have a quality program.
Correct. It means they are meeting the minimum compliance. And as I mentioned, the other remaining slides here have to do with the death reports, looking at type, frequency, and location, and the age of the consumers. And there is another slide, I believe Commissioner Neely requested at the last meeting, wanted to know the average age of participants in the different types of critical incidents.
Any questions? Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I know it was mentioned earlier that there is a bill pending regarding the adult abuse registry and a single point for making calls regarding allegations of abuse. DDSN is a member agency of the Adult Protection Coordinating Council, and we are very actively participating in those committees, monitoring the development, and also training for law enforcement entities and public awareness campaigns for people to know how and where to report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lisa Weeks, please give us the financial update.
Good morning.
Yeah, go ahead.
At 7 months into the fiscal year, the department expended about just under $414 million, or 57.61%. Of the spending plan approved in September. We are approximately 58.3% into the year, so our expenditures are on track. We're closely monitoring the expenditures. We're looking at revenues, and we expect to meet our commitments. At the beginning of the year, we came to you with about a $1,760,000 revenue expected balance, and we're hovering around the $2 million mark, so we're on target at that point. Last month, I mentioned we had a few one-time expenditures that would have overstated where we were at that point. At this point, we're under where we should be, but we still have the same one-time expenditures. We also are missing a second quarter payment from DHHS for our baby net payment, our state funds. We did talk with them last week and assured them that we're doing what we can, although it is not our program, it is their program, but we're doing what we can, and we're just awaiting that second order transfer.
Anybody have any?
We're still waiting for information on the Mercer report. We don't have that yet. And when we do, we'll be off and running. Or Pat will be working 12 hours a day. Are there any questions?
Have any questions? Anybody have any questions? No? No questions? Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I would have to have a copy.
Chuck Norman.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm here to ask for an approval for a contract for Excalibur in our forensic management. They opened a new home, moved 4 people in, 3 from correct care, 1 is a judicial admission. So we need to increase their contract by $250,000 for this year.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Okay, Joan Cooper.
I continue to bring the bids we took last week off 3 generators for emergency shelters in Spartanburg, Lawrence, and Newberry counties. This is FEMA 1802 for our S&T. The project scope is installation of new emergency generators at 3 sites. This is the 6th group to bid, leaving 3 remaining sites to design and procure the 23 total statewide locations that will provide reliable and continuous power for special needs shelters during emergency situations. This is the Charles Lee Center main building in Spartanburg. Will receive a 350 kW natural gas generator. Lawrence County DSNB Sinclair Day Center at Cypress Campus in Clinton will receive a 100 kW natural gas generator, and Newberry County DSNB's Newberry Industries will receive a 100 kW diesel generator. The alternates include packages, which are an important feature and will assist the local boards with the routine exercise maintenance and record keeping for the generators. The bids we received were from 3 contractors on Tuesday, February 12th, and as the lowest responsive bidder, it's recommended that the contract be awarded to Page Power Systems Incorporated of Gastonia, North Carolina, to include all relocation-based bids and all 3 location alternates for a total contract award of $574,307. While no problem is anticipated, permission is requested to award to the second low bidder should the low bidder be determined non-responsive.
Do you know any, I'm proud to see a new bidder on there, but I'm wondering, do you know much about them?
Yes, we've called and we've gotten 4 very positive references.
Oh, good. I move that we accept Page Power Systems bid.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you so much, Joan.
Thank you.
I just want to, before we go in executive session, I want to thank the policy committee for all the work they did, because I know they've worked hard on the policies that we approved today. At this time, we're going to go in executive session. I need a motion to discuss employment and contractual matters.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Our next regular meeting will be March 21st. See y'all then. Thank you for coming.
World Down Syndrome Day.